Hello, welcome to TerreScience. I'm Rajnish Khanna, and I have a guest here, a second time with us on TerreScience, Aïda. Aïda, welcome to TerreScience.
Thank you.
So we are going to talk about consciousness, and not just any consciousness, but artificial intelligence consciousness. And Ada spends a lot of time thinking about it and teaching courses, and she's given talks at several conferences. And we'll learn about whether Ada thinks that artificial intelligence can ever become conscious. But before we get started on that, Ada, would you tell us a little bit about how you got into this topic?
The topic of artificial consciousness.
Yes.
Well, actually, I was, I was always interested in computer science and artificial intelligence. And when I studied that, I started, I hit the problem of consciousness. And to me, this was, I found the limit, like it's the extreme boundary of where you can push AI. Can you ever reach that? And so, yeah, I fell in the rabbit hole then. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the ultimate AI. A Chat GTP or Chat GTP 4 now, they are really amazing. They can do a lot of things, but I don't think any machine today can fairly say is conscious,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I mean, at least AI provides a very good model, to at least to have a mathematical model of consciousness and to try to understand the underlying processes, the physical processes, and all of that. So at least AI can help in that regard.
So understanding the nuts and bolts of how consciousness may work or operate. But then, when I've discussed this before as well, the word consciousness, what does that mean?
No, yeah. Yeah, it's true that it's often a difficult topic to define consciousness, but there is this informal definition that consciousness is this phenomenon that starts when you wake up and that stops when you are in a dreamless sleep or a coma. That's because it relates to this experience of inner life that we have. But then in the science of consciousness, there is a very important definition, a distinction that has been made between phenomenal consciousness and access consciousness. So phenomenal consciousness is really the what it feels like of experience. And then you have access consciousness, or simply just functional consciousness, which is just the underlying computational processes that go with consciousness.
So, in those terms, then functional consciousness and access consciousness, or phenomenal and access, in the access consciousness, will that include the unconscious functions that we are not aware of? But does that include in the access consciousness, the nuts and bolts of consciousness?
Well, that's why I prefer to use the term functional consciousness, because when you speak about access consciousness, then sometimes it's used differently depending on context. But so at least when you refer to functional consciousness, you know that you're referring only to the computations underlying the conscious experience. And so that's not unconscious experience. That's really just the functions underlying, the mathematical functions underlying a conscious experience.
Okay. So do you think that you and I will agree on this aspect of consciousness, that the functional consciousness, which has the mathematical, let's say, equations, whatever is running underneath, but it has to depend on the ability of this conscious organism to perceive environmental information, and then whatever the mathematics happens, and then respond. So there is a perception and response to the environment.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, that there has to be, in addition to mathematics, there has to be some other mechanisms that are involved in perceiving information and then processing it, and then deciding in a way how to respond, and then responding. So it's more than just a mathematical.
Well, yes, definitely. Well, it's more computational. So so the mathematics would be just the basic algorithm, whereas you would have the computation itself when you run the software. And for perception, for engineers in computer science, well, perceiving is just receiving inputs, basically.
Right.
So
So if you have a AI robot, and let's say we put eyes and ears, or the robot can perceive input, visual as well as audio input, and then that process that is computed, and then it's compared to information that pre-exists, and that process then leads to this AI robot to decide whether I want to move forward or left or right or avoid something in front. But now after the robot decides and does that function, that is just a simple activity that was algorithm wise designed, but that whole thing doesn't make it conscious though.
No, indeed. So you can. That's an open question. Actually,
Okay.
that's the big open question. Even if you are to completely reproduce the functions that a human brain does within an AI system, we don't know if it would have phenomenal experience or if it would be what we call a philosophical zombie.
Yeah, but so if to reach that phenomenal experience, I think so. Currently, if we think about why we start thinking about AI should have or may acquire consciousness, is because of our computing power. We can run processes much faster, much better, smaller processors, and so we can do a lot of computation in much better and efficient way. But still, our leading methods are large language models and the LLMs. Those are the leading methods that we are applying. But when I think about what the phenomenal consciousness, I think it requires more than just that kind of information that can be captured in LLMs or these networks, even artificial neuronal networks. Because if I think about consciousness, I don't have to have language to be conscious. I don't have to have that information, that kind of LLM type of information to be conscious. That seems to be separate from my ability to just act like I can act like a robot unconsciously. So if we differentiate that, then consciousness is more towards ability to understand, maybe plan something and experience, which I think you are calling phenomenal consciousness, right?
Well, phenomenal consciousness is really just what it feels like.
Right. Okay.
So for instance, if you perceive color, it's just the color itself, like how the green will be different from red. And so you have this very famous thought experiment, Mary's room,
Right.
which really, explains that, illustrates that very well, where Mary knows everything about color and vision, and then she goes in but she's been always kept in this black and white environment, and at some point she's released and she perceives color for the first time. And so that's phenomenal experience. That's this further information that she gets when she goes out of the room, although she had access to all the scientific knowledge about color. She did not have access to the perceived quality of color itself. But so current LLMs, yeah, they don't really perceive colors. In fact, they are not multimodal yet. As you say, what they process is text. And so, of course, for us, well, we would tend to think that, we don't need that, or that, our consciousness is much more than that. But does it mean that you cannot have consciousness just based on text? That's a bit anthropocentric to go that far. It could be
Exactly.
the case that there is some form of phenomenal experience that is only created by text.
But which is interesting. I think you said it exactly how I think about it as well. It is very anthropomorphic to want to have another system feel and behave like how we feel and behave. And we want to almost impose our experience onto these artificial systems, and we want that. I mean, if we think about if we look at our historical progress, we've always enjoyed recording our face pictures, our audio voices in recorders and playing back. There is no other organism on the planet that records their own voice and listens to it over and over again. So we clearly enjoy listening to ourselves, watching ourselves, and then we want other things to behave that way. So, in your mind, you think the artificial or AI can reach that level of phenomenal consciousness, whether or not what we just discussed exists or not? Let's leave that. But can it get to that level of experience?
Well, it's a very difficult question.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
there is on one hand there is like my opinion, and then there is what we know scientifically. And currently, scientifically, there is a wide disagreement on this topic. And so you have several competing theories. So just to name a few, like you have panpsychism or panexperientialism, which will say that consciousness, phenomenal experience, is something which is encoded in reality at a very fundamental level, just like mass, for instance. So then, consciousness is ubiquitous, and any information processing system has consciousness. And so even old AI had consciousness. But then you will have the functionalist approaches, which will say that as soon as an information processing system, performs the same operations as a human brain does, then it will be conscious. And then you also have other theories, such as biological naturalism, which is prominently put forward currently by Anil Seth, where the idea is more that you need a biological substrate to have consciousness. And so these are like just the big three, let's say, but there are many, many, many more. And the scientific community is completely divided on this topic. So we don't actually have an answer, but we've made a lot of progress to identify the limits of our different approaches to consciousness. And so there is progress which is being made, but we need much more experiments to have a final answer. As for my opinion, I actually don't think that electronic devices can develop consciousness. I believe that we need something. Yeah, that's my opinion, and definitely not the current ones. Anyway, when we look at the current ones, if you look at the human brain works on the same kind of level of energy we need to light a light bulb.
Yeah.
And for LLMs, we need huge infrastructures and computing power, actually using a lot of energy. That's a big problem. It's an environmental disaster. Just when you look at that, you know that anyway, the functions that they're performing is not the same at all. And anyway, we haven't fully deciphered how the brain works. So, okay, we're using artificial neurons, but there are many more finer details about how our brain processes information that we are very far from being able to replicate.
Which I agree with Anil there, that I think there's a biological aspect to your consciousness as an experience, not the panpsychism and all of that. But if we were to think of consciousness as an experience, then I think there's a role for biology. But so when will we decide that AI is conscious? So if you wake up and one of your machines comes and says, hello, good morning, here's your coffee. So it did it all on its own, made your breakfast. And so will then we decide, okay, now that is conscious? Because we don't give anything below that to other organisms. So if you look at other living organisms, we are always moving towards that is not conscious. It's almost like, in the legal system is innocent until proven guilty. But when it comes to other living organisms, we always go with the theme not conscious until proven to be conscious. Whereas with AI, we seem to be taking another approach. We want it to be conscious, and that's why there is so much debate. So why do you think there is this differentiation between how we perceive things around us, something that we created, we want it to be conscious, and things that already exist that act and experience and may even have phenomenal consciousness, but we don't want to declare them conscious?
Yeah, well, more and more people now, I mean, this is whether they're conscious or not, more and more people now are advocating for robot rights, or or raising awareness about their moral status, the fact that, they're already moral agents. And so can they also be moral patients? And the fact that we are completely underprepared while technology is moving fast. But yeah, we don't have yet those robots that you're speaking of.
Right.
That would be completely indistinguishable from humans. Zombies, it's even possible that it's just impossible to have them. But according to others, we should, on the contrary, we should build them, but by making sure that they don't have phenomenal experience, so that we know that they don't have moral status, and so we can use them more like extensions of ourselves.
Right. Well, it's true, because if they start to have moral status, then owning them and asking them to do things is almost like going back to slavery.
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So then they'll have their own rights and their own legal protections, and then because that's how we operate. So very, very interesting. Then if we look at other things, do you think other animals and plants are more conscious at the moment? Because if you give robots this little bit of consciousness, like you were saying, that maybe that experience of just moving forward and knowing to move forward has some level of consciousness, then there are other living organisms that can do that much better. So are these other organisms conscious then?
Moving forward, do you mean?
Or yeah, I mean, or doing something, taking information from the environment, like inputs, and then
Mm.
responding to the inputs.
Mm.
And there are many organisms that we don't think are conscious that
Mm-hmm.
can do that.
Mm.
They can take inputs, compute it, and respond, including
Yeah.
plants. Plants can do that. They
Mm-hmm.
can move towards, they can take the input of which direction the light is coming from, and they can bend towards light. But we don't consider them conscious. Uh, so that's another. So we are leaning more towards making artificial intelligence more conscious with the similar aspects that we don't grant to other organisms consciousness, even though they can perform better than that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know I mean, yeah, some people currently believe that current AI is conscious, but I'm not sure that, well, first of all, personally, I don't.
Yeah.
And I don't know how this relates to plants.
Yeah.
But I don't think that it's only a matter of input output in this case, right? The difference between AI systems and plants.
It's biology too.
Yes, I guess you would be more inclined to declare plants conscious if you lean towards biological explanations of consciousness. Whereas when you're more of a functionalist, you will say that computers can perform operations that are closer to humans, and humans have consciousness. And so then you will be more inclined to attribute consciousness to AI systems.
Right. This is why I think there needs to be a better definition of the word consciousness, so that we can, first of all, we can all of us agree what is consciousness. Because if you don't agree, then everyone is left to come up with their own definition, and then there's no common ground for how to decide who's conscious. So yeah. But so I also have the same opinion as you. I don't think that artificial machines can get the phenomenal consciousness as humans. But I'm sure we are going to be trying in the next decades, 10, 20, 30 years. We'll be trying to make machines conscious. And last time we discussed ethical issues about this. Would you like to add anything else to this about AI consciousness and what you talk about when you give talks or teach?
Well, we are definitely going to try to build them,
Yeah.
but the reason why we are trying to build them is also because we want AI that are closer to our own cognition. After
Hmm.
all, we're using them, the more they can naturally integrate in our flows, the better it is for everyone. And so it's useful to have an AI that can process visual and auditory information seamlessly, and this allows better interactions. So that's a good motivation already to go in this direction. But also, I was mentioning earlier energy efficiency.
Hmm.
Definitely also by not just trying to imitate the whole range of functions that a human performs for
Hmm.
interactions, for social interactions, but if we try to model more closely how the human brain works, this is also supposed to help us have better models that are more energy efficient, etc., etc. So there are many, many, many reasons to want to go in this direction, but I don't believe that,
Hmm.
well, I believe that for most people who are working on this, they're not trying to build phenomenal experience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even humans are in a way specialized consciousnesses evolved in a specialized manner, because most people will agree that we evolved for survival. So our consciousness has always directed our abilities towards that survival. So it is in a way focused and specialized development. And so same way, like you're saying, I think even if we go in that direction, there'll be more specialized functions that each of these robots or these machines will be charged with. And it's not going to be, nobody's going to try to, like you said, energy wise, it may be impossible too. So yeah, well, very good. So I think we both agree that AI is not going to have a phenomenal consciousness as we experience as humans. And then we will leave it at that, that I think some biology is, in my mind, I think biology is required for that ultimate phenomenal consciousness. And the reason I think that is because biology brings in some more than computation at the biochemical level, at the genetic level information, and ability to instantly modify, like protein modifications, and respond to environment and generate a response that can be amplified. So I'm sure a computational system can copy that, but still the diversity of those enzymes, the huge amount, and like you said, processing that goes on in our brain, we can do so much with the energy of a light bulb. So somehow biology has achieved that over many years of evolution, and I think that that may be a requirement for consciousness to be experienced.
Yeah, well, definitely for our kind of phenomenal experience. Then there's always the possibility that just text
Right.
will create some form of, but I'm not sure that we should even call that phenomenal experience at that stage. But yeah, so biology, it's not, as you mentioned, there is already this evolution over so many generations in biological systems, and we don't do anything like that with AI systems.
Right.
So they already lack this component. So if there is an evolutionary part to consciousness, then they will not have it. And there are also many other functions that go with the biological organisms. For instance, you mentioned, well, very simply, biological systems are associated with life and death, right?
Right.
And so that already defines some constraints on the organism. And yeah, so you mentioned survival. Yeah, so current AI systems don't have anything like that. And also, yes, because these are also associated with the psyche, so psychological elements. And these psychological elements are very much shaped by life and death, which are concepts that directly apply to us, but not at all in the same kind of way to them. And they also shape our emotions. Our inner lives also have these emotions. Emotions currently we don't have them in these systems. We don't even really have good models of scientific models of emotions in humans. So yes, so this is, for instance, a very good example of how far we are from ever replicating something like our human experience, even just at a functional level, let alone the phenomenal part. Then you also have homeostasis. So, the ability to self-regulate, to environmental constraints, all of that is completely missing from current AI systems. And so, yeah, we need to study more biological systems, and we need to imitate them more. But this research program is huge. It will take years and decades.
Right. But I'm glad, and that's a good place to end this, because I also think that to thinking about consciousness, it is not just mathematics and computation and LLMs. I think we at some point we need to think about biology. And as you and I have heard, there are people who are trying to integrate living systems, artificially grown brains into the machines as well. So there is more integration of biological systems with the technical systems. So that's also another interesting direction.
Yes. In those systems, then phenomenal consciousness becomes
Yeah.
more palpable.
Right. Yeah. So Well, great. Aida, thank you. As always, it was a good discussion, and I'm glad we both have the same conclusion. We both agree and the same opinion. So, yeah, would you like to add anything else?
No, not really. I mean, no.
Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you again for being a guest on TerreScience, and I'm sure we'll have you again in the near future. Thank you for
My
sharing your
pleasure.
thoughts.
Thank you.
So today's discussion was about AI consciousness, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please remember to like the podcast, and we'll see you next time.